Hey everyone, welcome back to session number 4 of this cold email course. We're going to be diving into what you need to do to build prospect list. All right, let's get into it. So the agenda for this session is that we're going to go over some tools that you need to build a list, how you should go about to cleaning your list and queuing the data, and then about creating a process, which is fundamentally what you want to be doing when you need to scale this initiative, right? It's not a too long of lessons, but hopefully you find it very valuable and actionable. All right, let's get into this. So there's multiple tools utilized that you can use to build lists, right? So I've broken down on two levels. One is on the individual side, and then the other is on a group level when you have to do mass amount, right? So if you're just looking for a handful of emails here and there, one off, I still use this to date. There's a great tool. It's probably the most popular one. It's called Hunter, right? You can go in, put in a domain, and it'll give you the best guess from there, right? Um, there's another tool that's been extremely popular. You pay per credit basis called Lucia, very good. And then there's another one that's called Phantom Buster. There's a plethora amount of tools out there. These are just some of the ones I've shortlisted. Again, for one-offs, they're pretty good. But then when you need to go build like a solid amount of lists, which is like, I don't know, let's say 500 to 1,000 people, these are the tools you want to be looking into. There's everything from big data companies like ZoomInfo and DiscoverOrgs to companies like Find That Lead, which comes baked out of like they have a complete solution. You just put in your information and you're good to go, right? The same thing with Seamless and Apollo, right? Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about these other tools called Wiz and Upwork because I think one's a traditional one and another one's kind of modern up and coming. So let's talk a little bit about Wiza. So we use Wiza internally at Growth Rhino. We're not trying to promote them. It's just this type of tool. And what this type of tool is, you use LinkedIn Sales Navigator as a means to search, and then Wiza will go and scrape it. And then go and find the relevant email, and then also at the same time look into uh, whether or not that email is verified or not. So one of the reasons we use this tool is because it's built like from a similar agency founder. So we trust it and it really understands our workflow, right? Another tool like this that does something very similar is Snove, SLNOV.io, which I mentioned previously. The other thing that I want to talk about is using virtual assistants, right? There's a lot of them. We use them on Upwork, and we still do use them when we need manual list building. What I mean by manual list building is, let's say you have an individual who says like, "Hey, I want to prospect all these companies that I met at a conference or from an association, or here's an attendee list," right? To go and take that list and put it through any of these existing tools will be an absolute nightmare. You're better off hiring virtual assistants from the Philippines, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, or whichever to go and actually manually build that list, right? A typical VA will cost you $5 US an hour. So, what I'd like to do over here is saying, like, okay, fine. I give them a sample list and I give it to two, three different VAs and be like, hey, how long will it take you to find the contact information for the CEOs of these companies? Here's like 10, 15 of them, time it. Once you have a good idea of that, they'll come back and say, okay, fine, it took me like 1 hour, 2 hour, 30 minutes. Then you can carefully calculate, okay, fine, if I need to get 1,000 prospects or 1,000 individuals, this is how much it's going to cost me, right? So virtual assistants, you really want to be using it more on that 500 to 1,000 level. You don't want to be using a virtual assistant to go prospect 10,000 individuals. It's just the unit economics there would not make sense, right? So something to consider, okay? And to this date, virtual assistants is probably the most popular way of building lists in our space. And I would highly still recommend them when you need to. Okay, and this is generally what you'll expect for any output. You'll receive a CSV file with a bunch of names, emails. Some of them might give you even phone numbers. It really depends on what your outputs are upon export. One practice I don't see being employed a lot in industry is the whole idea of cleaning your list. There's a lot of great options there. Neverbound, ZeroBound, Snove also does it, Proofy, Verifalia. I would recommend Neverbounce. We use that internally, and we've been doing it for quite some time. It's probably not the cheapest, but it's probably the best and fastest. And they give you this what they call real-time verification status. So you put it in a list, and then it would clean it up. right? And it gives you all these indicators. Hey, these are these valid emails, these are non-valid. And the reason this is important is for what we call list hygiene. And when you go outbound, one of the things you need to be certain about is that the email is authentic, right? So what Neverbounce does is it cleans the list and says, hey, these are real email addresses, these are outdated, these are fake, whichever. There's these different statuses. One of them is called obviously valid. The other one's called accept all. Accept all means they don't know. So as a general practice, when you are sending outbound emails, unless you're really, really certain about the accept all email addresses, right? And that's generally common for like enterprise. I would ditch the accept alls and only go after valid emails, because you cannot afford sending out emails and getting a very high bounce rate. If you get a high bounce rate, there's a high likelihood that your email address could be burned or your domain could be fried, meaning they're not going to be as functional, because Google will see, or Outlook will see that, oh, this person's sending out 1,000 emails and 5-10% of it's being blocked, and this is probably a spammer. Let's shut down their account temporarily. So something I highly recommend you doing. And again, and these tools are cheap. They're like, Neverbounce is like, I think 0.001 cent per email address. So, we go buy 100,000 credits every month roughly. Okay. The last thing that I would really talk about is QAing the data. And what I mean by this is like, when you get raw data in this form, you have things like company names that have like LLC, INC. You have the first names that have like Gregory instead of Greg. If there's someone that has like an initial in it, like mine, I have Ahan K. Dot. There'll be somebody would cold email me with Ahan K. Dot. I automatically know that this is a fake or automated version. So what you want to be doing is going through that data and also like just cleaning it up, right? A lot of individuals, especially if you're using like LinkedIn as a searching mechanism and then using Wizard, they'll put emojis in their names and all of that type of stuff. So you'd want to remove all of those special characters, because what will happen is when you put it in a cold email platform, those special characters will like render into something very bizarre. It might just be squares and circles. So you want to make sure that your Google Sheet or your CSV file is like super, super clean. I've not seen a ton of tools that allow you to do this. One of the ones I've came across is MailRankey. And this is what they do essentially. They'll use an AI tool. I think the first 100 credits are free. Again, none of the tools here I'm suggesting I'm affiliated with. This is how we do things internally. But feel free to look them up. I'm just trying to help you understand what type of tools are required, right? So what this tool does, it'll go in and clean this up so you don't have to do it manually, right? Or hire a VA to do it. Something worth looking into. It's usually, it sounds a lot more labor intensive when it's not, because if you're using the CSV filters properly, you should be able to identify things pretty fast. So if you go to FirstNate and say, to use the filtering function within a Google Sheet, it says use the filter and then click contains, and put under contains, put like a full stop or INC or LLC or under the company name, and you should be able to identify that really fast. Or if you sort by name, you should be able to see what sticks out really fast, right? But in general, you just want to make sure that the data is clean and usable. The last thing I really want to talk about is about creating a process, right? It's very important that you formalize each step of your process, and that way you can replicate it. And then that way it's off your plate. If you're planning on scaling cold email as a channel, this is pretty important, right? We do this internally at Growth Rhino, but just it's a good practice to have, even if you have building internal teams, because then you can walk through and be like, hey, this is how you clean your list, this is how you QA it. So before anything actually goes live, you know that your prospects have gone through this system, which is pretty important, right? So one of the things we talked about, like this is our process, is like, hey, we'll use Sales Navigator to identify prospects, use Wizard to scrape it, Neverbounce to clean it, VA will manually QA the list, we submit to client for approval, then we upload to Campaign. This is our process. Doesn't mean it should be yours, but just to give you an idea of how deep you need to think. You just need to make sure that the steps are outlined. Some final things to consider. When you're building lists, like consider different items like geography. Like a lot of the times I see people that say like, hey, we just want to hit North America. Well, North America is like 3 large countries, right? Mexico's included. People often forget about that, right? So like try to understand, like, are you going macro level, micro level? Like try to go zero in on your geography when you can. Seniority level is pretty important. Are you going after C-suite? Are you going after VPs? Like really define the data properly, the search parameters properly, right? Another, like I just talked about, is to make sure you QA the data, but also like look at company sizes, like what's the headcount, company industries, like is this list relevant, right? You want to make sure that this list is really, really targeted to to your campaign and to your initial initiative. And finally, you want to be cleaning your list, right? That's all we have for this session. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, take care.